Ask yourself this. What would you love to be true about your life a year from now? If you don't have a clear answer that your whole life is currently aimed at, this episode is for you. Novus Global Executive Coach Jason Brown breaks down why high performers can't answer that question, what it's really costing them, and how naming your vision isn't arrogance. It's the bravest thing you'll ever do. Welcome to the No Limits Leadership Podcast. We discuss ancient wisdom, real-world experiences, and the latest concepts on mastering leadership of self and others. If you're committed to maximizing your life and your impact on the world, you're home. Welcome to the No Limit Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Sean Patton. And today I am joined by Jason Brown. He's an executive coach with Novus Global who works with leaders carrying a vision that matters, not just to themselves, but to the world around them. His work challenges leaders to confront the cost of leaving their vision unrealized while stepping into the pursuit of something meaningful and transformative. Jason's coaching centers on the belief that pursuing a bold vision doesn't just change outcomes, it shapes the person, clarifies purpose, and brings something needed into the world. Jason, thanks for being here today, man.
So glad to be with you, Sean. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. I know. Yeah, I mean, you have a very interesting background kind of that brought you to your current role as an executive coach at Novus Global. And before this, you were a coach in a different sense, working in the financial sector. So what originally drew you to working with financial advisors and high performers?
Yeah. So first of all, I think, of course, this wasn't with a lot of thought when I was 22 years old, right? But what I found myself doing, probably my junior and senior year of college, is I was hanging out with people, and again, without being super conscious about it, I was very interested in helping them grow as a human being. So, that's something that's just tracked with me all throughout my adult life. So kind of functionally, I was a pastor for 22 years, college students for the first 12, and then in a church setting out in Paramount, Compton, Long Beach, California for 10 years. And then originally from Iowa, we moved back to Iowa in 2016. That's when I started in the financial planning and investment management industry and worked at just a remarkable local firm here in Des Moines. And, it sounds kind of funny, like I was never an advisor, but the work I did was lead the team of senior lead advisors at this group. And so a lot of my focus really was, my kind of working theory, my working thesis was, if I can help them become better human beings, my guess is they're going to become better advisors. And I also had the good fortune of working within an organization that was like, we are behind that vision, and working with people who also had a real vision for growing as human beings themselves. So yeah, that's kind of what got me into coaching. It's another avenue. And I would say I probably have the most excitement about the possibility of this avenue creating more transformation within the lives of people, including my own, than anything I've done up to this point.
Why is that?
Well, two things. First of all, I'll just talk a little bit about how it affected me. So I spent years running away from the question like, hey, what would you love to see happen in the future? And I had all sorts of reasons as to why that was not a good question for Jason Brown to answer. And all my reasons were really good. What I realized is probably my primary reason was I was avoiding failure, which, that wasn't necessarily something I wanted to admit. But working with a coach who gave me the opportunity to get out into the future and say, well, actually, there is some stuff. I've got some ideas in here about what I'd like to do that is, I would say occurred to me as being so impossible or so out of the realm of possibility that I didn't want to really ever say them out loud. Right. And so getting the opportunity to do that is one thing. And then the second thing is, what a good coach does is they help you articulate in very concrete ways the steps or the commitments you're going to make in order to get to that vision. And then they hold you accountable to it. And honestly, I've been in a lot of good systems, but I've never had the sort of challenge and accountability that has come with getting coached, being a coach.
If you look back maybe in your past or working with others, you mentioned there was, a lot of reasons around not getting clear on vision, just sort of this reactive mode, just going to the next step. Do you think that is intentional, or you mentioned, is it just too scary? Where do you think that the motivation comes from if we think that I know I found this. If we walked around and asked, 100 people on the street, like, what are you working toward? What's your life going to be like in 5 years if you're successful? My guess is 90% or more, 95% or more are going to have no idea.
Yeah.
Stop. You can't afford to keep operating this way. You're a smart, successful leader, and right now you're stuck. You know it. And that feeling, it's not weakness. That's data telling you something needs to change. Here's the truth. Saying stuck isn't neutral. It's costing you mentally, professionally, every single day. After 10 years coaching C-suite level executives through exactly problems like this, I have built the GAIN framework, and it delivers clarity in just 20 minutes. Sign up for the No Limit Leadership newsletter and get the Unstuck Guide free. The link is in the description. 5 seconds to change everything. Do it now. It's very interesting. It's like a very, like,
Yeah.
why do we avoid that?
Well, here's the first thing, and this may sound just real silly. Nobody takes the time to ask us and listen. So, that's one of the things, regardless if I end up coaching anyone, when I sit down to have, let's say, a first or second meeting with people who are interested in coaching, I think there's incredible value for them to get just by sitting with somebody who has time to say, hey, what's out there, and is not going to leave the conversation until they start to give some answers. So that would be my first answer, is that, for the most part, nobody's asking us the question, and then nobody's given us the time to kind of like prod, be interested enough to get us to the point where we're giving answers that then start to like maybe get us excited about going after something. So, that'd be that's the first thing that comes to mind for me. How about for you?
What was coming from you as you were just talking, I was going to ask you, but maybe I'll try to give my pass at it as well, is, this immediate sort of excuse of like, well, who knows, right? Like
Yeah.
the world is going to change. Things change so fast. Who knows what I'm going to want, be, whatever, in 5 years, like what's the point? And I think that it becomes this attachment to outcome where it's like, well, I don't want to set this big vision or say I'm going to do this thing. Cause you mentioned like fear of failure earlier. That's always been a huge driver for me. I didn't unconsciously. And so it's this sense of like, well, I don't want to say this big, scary thing because what happens if I don't get it? Then I quote unquote fail. Then I feel like a failure. And so it's just like, let's just put one step in front of the other and create a worldview, a value system where that becomes virtuous.
Yes. Well, yeah. And I'll say I had a lot of a virtue attached to that exact same thing. And, of course, the virtue was a cover up for my own, like, well, what if I were to say this out loud? What would people think about me? What was
that virtuous story? I'm wondering, like, what were you telling yourself back then? Like, what was that story Jason was telling himself?
So, it's hard for me to divorce this from my own concept of faith. So, here's a couple things. Nobody knows the future. Only God knows the future. And so, don't plan for it, sort of thing. And that's definitionally then what it means to live by faith, something like that. And here's this other thing, when I had the opportunity to start to talk about some of the things that were in me, there is some bigness to it. And so I was attaching the virtue of humility as well to, hey, I'm not going to sort of go out on a limb and go after this thing or go after that thing because, I want to remain humble. And I don't want to be that type of person who is like, I'm going to do this, or I think I can go do this big thing. And you know what? You don't need to be that type of person to start to look out there and begin to pursue stuff. So yeah, I definitely attached a particular version of faith and a particular version of humility to, for honestly, I think maybe some of the vision that had been planted in me. And I keep doing this here because this is where I feel like it's located in our bodies, like somewhere in this area.
Yeah. I love this. And I think this is an important topic for a lot of people listening. And so and I think you're uniquely positioned to commentate and give your opinion on. So if I had to create like sort of characters or whatever the word is, right? Like if I was to inflate two sides of this, maybe coin from especially probably like in this country, like a Christian faith background. I know people that are maybe even more extreme than what you said, right? Of just like, I'm just a humble servant of the Lord. I'm just going to show up, do my work every day and take it. And like,
Yep.
and like anything outside of that, anything is just like anything outside comfort zone is like, that's not my place. I'm just here doing it. Like that's one extreme version. And then if I had to maybe look at this as a scale and go to the far other side, you have, again, what occurs to me as like the God wants you to be rich. And like, if you're not rich, you're not going to like, give. And like, maybe there's that funny movie with like the hyper about the like mega church pastor, right? Like driving his jets and he's like, this is what Jesus
No,
wants, like it's like the far
wait,
version of that,
no,
right? So it's like, what's in between? Like, where do we
yeah.
sit in that?
First of all, I got to tell you a funny story that's coming up.
Yeah.
So when I was pastor in Long Beach, there was a show that was going to be started. It was called The Real Pastors of LA. And one of the pastors who was on it, get this is so great. He was from Long Beach as well. And so he says, hey, can I talk with you about something? And so we get coffee. He's explaining to me the idea of the show. And he goes, I'm trying to figure out a way to say this to you. We just need somebody who's like kind of normal on this show. And it was because all the other pastors that were being featured, I mean, just hard for me to say this, but they were driving Bentleys, they had a jet, these sorts of things. And they said, hey, we're just looking for somebody whose life is pretty normal. And, I declined. I wasn't really interested in them making my life non-normal. But I will say, yeah, that one of my huge fears was I had in mind all those pastors who, you hear all the stories, right? At the end of the day, major internal issues, probably in it because they have some desperate need for attention, probably in it because there's greed and they're papering it over it with all this religious language. And frankly, many stories of pastors who had just totally used up people in their congregation. I definitely lived with that story and said to myself, I will never be that pastor. I will never be that leader. And, I think that was a great thing. I think it served me for a long time, but I also see the ways that it was limiting. So it's really funny that you would bring that up because yes, as an archetype that just lived in me. And I was like, never, never, never.
So, and you being in that world and obviously processing this for yourself and coming to, again, this new story, this new way of relating to your purpose and how you want to impact people and then tied to your faith. So what is the current story? What is the belief that you're on now that feels true?
Yeah, it's you read that introduction and I'm always tweaking, that sort of a statement, right? The thing that is really grounding me and that has more energy, I think, than anything I've come across up to this point, Sean, is I realize what I want to do is help people bring beauty into the world. So like that to me, even saying it, it just grounds me. It's like, this is why I'm a coach. This is why you're doing this. And, it may sound weird, two dudes here talking about, and I know what you used to do in your past, and, two dudes here talking about bringing beauty into the world. But as you know, beauty can be defined in so many ways. And when I'm thinking about with the clients that you and I are working with or the clients that are out there in the future, it's okay. There's going to be people who don't, this concept of bringing beauty into the world, it's not going to connect with them. But there are plenty of people that I know for a fact that it connects to deeply. And they're thinking, so what's the beauty you want to bring into the world via the business that you own, via the culture that you want to create at work, via the opportunities you want to create for your colleagues? What's the beauty you want to bring into your own private life? What's the beauty you want to bring into your friendships or your marriage relationship or your relationship with your kids? Or whatever it looks like, the organizations that you're part of. So what I found is as I've really like leaned into this and talked with people about this is people really connect to it and they are thinking about their lives and like, man, am I creating beautiful things? Am I bringing beauty into the world? And my occurrences, I mean, this has probably always been the case, but like now is a huge time for human beings to think about, okay, how can I be the creator of beauty? So that's the thing that is really energizing me right now and has become my why behind my coaching.
So you talk with leaders often, either especially the business owners or senior leaders, whatever, leaders in a community, whatever space they're in. If I get, I hear pushback on this sort of concept, it's usually around, I can't do another thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like people are like, I can't add another thing. Look at all the stuff I'm doing. I'm burned out, right? Or whatever the
Yeah.
before that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wondering what your take is or your response is to that sort of sentiment. Like, yeah, that sounds awesome. I'd love to bring beauty in the world, but
Yeah.
dude, look at all the stuff I got going on.
Yeah. Yeah. When I've talked to people about that, so yeah, there's been a few times where I'm asking people about, hey, put yourself a year out. And if I were to run into you and say, and the first words that came, said, how's it going, Sean? And the first words that came out of your mouth were, I can't believe it, but what would you put in there? And, there's been a portion of people who have heard that as just another big thing that they're supposed to do. Just another like big, like project or a series of shoulds or a series of have tos in order to be a worthwhile human being. I assume you kind of run into that a little bit as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the things I try and work with them on is, first of all, hey, if we could set that aside for a moment and not think about any of the have tos, should tos, what would you love to be true about your life? And, they say some things and then they'll say something like, but if I were to do that, I don't know if I would even have time left over for my kids anymore or something like that. And I say, okay, well, then that's got to be a part of the product that the part of the vision that you're going for is time with kids, and then try and help them articulate, well, what would you love to be true about the life with your kids as well? And then just have them entertain just the possibility that perhaps they could pursue all of these things in a way that is not totally exhausting, in a way that's demanding even more time, in a way that's demanding even more stress. In the language that you and I are using, that high performance math, which is more time, more energy, more stress, more of all these things, right? And I try and get them to imagine, are there ways that this could happen without more, 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 more? And I'll be honest with you, some people they go, oh, let's talk about that. That's interesting. And some people are like, I just don't see the path. Yeah.
Man, I love that. And so two things came up for me when you were talking and I was making notes. One is that if we either for ourselves or if we're working with a coach or talking about this with, a peer or mentor or something, that if we create vision that's not holistic, that's lacking something, we run into real problems, right? Like if I say, what's my vision for a year? And I'm about the perfect vision, but I'm just thinking about my business.
Yeah.
But it lacks, you mentioned like, well, like, what's my spiritual to achieve, which I know how I've done in the past. I've like created this, like, I'm going to make this much money and I'm going to do this much thing. And then I started running that race and I saw like what that looked like. And I was like, oh crap, I don't even think I want that.
Yeah.
because of the cost or the time associated with it. And so, that was what came up for me. It's like, I think it's so powerful to, even if we're talking with a business coach, or even if you're thinking about business, but you're visioning for yourself, is like, ask a vision that's holistic around like what matters in your life. What are your key priorities, and kind of like starting there. Is that like a good point? You think like the prioritization thing comes up for me, like what's most important first, and let's make sure that's included in vision.
I think that's huge. And also, what I've tried to do every time is when they say, oh, but then I'm worried that this won't happen. It's like, no, let's put that in the vision, right? No, let's include that, but let's include it as a positive. So what is it that you want? This thing that you're afraid of losing out on. Okay. Well, let's not only bring it in as I don't want to lose out on it. Let's bring it in as okay, well, what would occur to you as exactly what you want related to that thing? So I think my answer is yes, for sure. What you said is like, let's try and be holistic, personal health, close family and friend relationships, things like that. Let's not leave that out. And then when it occurs to somebody like, oh my gosh, if I were to go after this, the story I'm telling myself is these things would completely suffer. Okay, well, let's just bring them into the vision. Let's just bring it in. Then let's put a vision spin on it, not just a crud, but like, okay, yeah, what would you love to be true with that relationship and this?
Yeah. And my second point there was about this high performance versus meta performance construct. And I think you're hitting it perfectly right now, which is if you list all those things out and you approach it with your past patterns or high performance mindset of more and more and more. And I want to have, you're like, I want to travel to Europe 4 times a year. And I want, my relationship with my wife to be perfect and my kids are this, and I'm going to I have a 6-pack and I'm going to have $1 million business, like all that stuff. And you're like, if you high perform that, or you have a high performance mindset, I guess my argument would be most people, myself included, when we first do that exercise, it comes across overwhelming and heavy and impossible because we have this high performance mindset.
Yeah.
And the power of meta performance in our world, or taking of like, what am I capable of, is like, what if we look at, what if there's different ways to accomplish it, and almost be obsessed with, I love in entrepreneurism, a long time ago, I heard somebody said it. I wish I could give them credit. Stay obsessed with the problem, not the solution.
Yeah.
Like, and so, so like, explain to someone maybe that difference between when they're like, what are you talking about, high performance versus meta performance? And how does that let me accomplish or create a vision that seems impossible?
Well, the first thing I think is worth saying is, if people are going to list off a bunch of stuff, there probably is a place where you say, okay, do you really want this? Do you really want this? And I think most of the time what you'll find out, whether it be with yourself or with the people that you're working with, there's some stuff on this list that when they're, like, you know what? No, I don't really want that. It's just, I felt like somebody who's a really good human being or a super high performing human being, that's something they would want or they should do, And so it's like, well, what would it look like if we just pulled that out? So that's something that, I think the great thing about when you move from, so the high performance question, right, that you're asking is, how can I be the best? And there's so many limiting things that happen in that way. First of all, you're typically, when you're asking that question, you're asking it in terms, you're defining it within whatever context you're in, right? So, it's like, put yourself in a company and it's like, okay, great. I know that I'm the best manager there. Well, you may not even be close to the best manager on the planet, but within the context, you're the best thing. And that can really be limiting then. It can kind of limit your growth. The math on high performance is more, 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 more. When you ask the meta performance question, which is what am I capable of, and you're getting coached towards that end, a good coach is going to ask you to consider the possibility of brand new ways of thinking, and also consider the possibility of brand new ways of behaving that are not more, 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 more. And so it's really requiring a certain amount of reimagination and also reinvention of who you are. The other thing I would say is, and this has been true for me, is when you're pursuing that really, it's seemingly impossible, but it's also super thrilling, glorious, beautiful. And there's not a lot of shoulds there. It kind of like you think, "Oh, I get to do this." When you take out all the shoulds, you find yourself uh, with just more energy to move in that direction anyway. I mean, and maybe that's a question for you too. I'd be curious, like, have you found that for yourself or for your clients as well?
Yes. And I will say it's taken work for me to get there. A realization through that the work we've done at Novus Global together and the Meta Performance Institute has really helped give additional clarity and language, I think, to it. But before, my answer was always go harder. Identity around the ability to go harder and outwork people, outdo things like that. And if I have to strip it down to what I've gotten to a place now in the last few years of this self work is what I start identifying is the primary driver, fear or love.
Yeah.
And if it's fear, like fear is I think it can be useful in very short. It's like an acute tool.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like the deadline is here. I gotta hammer it out, or this emergency happens, or else my family, whatever. Like it can be very useful in these small, acute senses. But for you brought up the shoulds part. But if a should's in front of it, it's a fear. It's like, well, what if not? If you don't get it, right? Yeah. And so, and my fear, my primary driver is the need to feel like I matter. That's what drove me for a long time was if I don't, if I can't, uh, if I don't get into West Point or if I don't graduate high enough, like then I won't matter. I'll just be another dude on the street who doesn't
Yep.
matter in the world.
Yep.
And then same thing going to infantry, going to special forces. Like it was always, I had to push myself and figure out what I was capable of. And I had my own stories around that. And just like yours, I think there was some positive and aspects around service and around contributing to a greater good and like things that are still valuable. But underneath that, the primary driver was still this fear-based of if I don't do this, if I don't stand out, if I'm not the best, then I don't matter.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about, I'm making up then that one of the things that changed internally for me, for you, is just this realization I already do matter.
Yeah. And I'd say that's like being completely transparent, my current struggle. Like I'm having current conversations with multiple coaches about this. And so, and actually one of my commitments that I have failed at since my last coaching session is to ask people where they get their enoughness from. So let me point that at you. Jason, where do you get your enoughness from?
Okay. So my guess is there's going to be a part of me that is not going to answer that question for the rest of my life. So let me be, I don't think I'm ever going to get so zen that it's like, all right, I've got enough enoughness. Where my enoughness comes from is this belief that I am deeply loved by the creator of the cosmos and that who I am, not, there's better versions of Jason to come. There's less messy versions of Jason to come. There's a lot of growth that I can have. But who I am, even just right on this podcast right now, is a gift. So wherever I go, if I'm just showing up at Starbucks, I'm thinking about the fact that my presence in that place, there's an opportunity for just me to be a gift. It could be to the people next door. It could be to the workers who are there. But just this belief that me, who I am, wherever I go, I take this gift with me. And when I've really leaned into that fact, I am deeply and profoundly loved, and I just am a gift. I feel enough, I get off track regularly from that, but that's kind of my answer. And I do think there's something like at age 54, I can observe my life and I do think that this has become even more true, this belief. I don't become a gift, or I don't matter because of the next 5 amazing things I'm going to do, right now. So that's the answer.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate it. Thanks for that vulnerability and being candid. And what came up for me too is that in some of your content and in previous conversations, and I believe this too, and I'll give you kind of my take maybe at the end, but like that creating that vision, because you're talking about this identity. Like when you talked about enoughness, it was really this switch to identity versus doing. So in creating vision and pursuing vision, you mentioned that, or you have said before that pursuing a vision shapes the soul. But it's the pursuit of vision that changes things at an identity level. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, I'll do my best here to do it.
You've built something real. The career, the title, the business, maybe all three. But ever feel simultaneously overwhelmed and bored? Like your calendar is full, your responsibilities keep growing, and yet somewhere deep down, you're no longer expanding. That's the strange reality for a lot of high performers. Not failing, not collapsing, just slowly settling for less than they're actually capable of. Because eventually talent stops being the issue. The real problem is this: nobody in your life is challenging you at the level you actually operate. I spent years sitting across from executives and owners who had every reason to be satisfied and helping them name what they were actually hungry for. A vision call is one focused conversation, no pitch, no program, just clarity on who you're becoming, what you really want next, and what's standing in your way. You don't need more motivation. You need someone who can see what you can't yet. Go to seanpatton.me/vision. That's seanpatton.me/vision and book your call today, because the life you're capable of isn't going to wait forever.
So one of the things, you do a lot of work, you and I, with our coaches or with the people that we're coaching, and you're getting out into the future and you're articulating these targets or these outcomes, vision that you want to pursue. And that's always changing and hopefully always growing and adding. Great. You do that work and then you're working on the strategy to get there. At the end of the day, in some respects, the achievement of the vision, the realization of the vision, it's just the cherry on top. It's who you become, the type of person that you're required to become in order to realize that vision. So when I think, part of my vision, related to bringing beauty into the planet, I have specific groups of individuals that I'm thinking about that I would love to help them bring beauty. And, one group is politicians. So that strikes me as like a radically new concept. Like, hey, let's think a little bit about the beauty you want to bring in. They're like, what in the world is that? But I want to let me make this tangible. Our son, he's a junior in college and he's a runner. So he just had his indoor season, and during the indoor season, he focused on the mile. And so I did a lot of coaching with him prior to the season. He's got a great coach too, so at his school, but I did a lot of coaching with him. And one of the things that Jack chose to do is he chose to measure success on the basis of whether or not he stayed true to the commitments that he made. So he had two big goals just personally. One was run a sub 4-minute mile. The other one was to win the national championship in the mile. And then he worked backwards from that, and he made commitments to run. We called them experiments, actually, in our language. So he committed to certain experiments related to that goal and also related to his leadership on the team. So there were certain things he was committed to. And all during the year, what he was celebrating was the fact that he kept running the experiments that he wanted to run. He stayed true to the commitments that he made. And so, this story, it has a happy ending. He ended up winning the mile at the national championships for Division III indoors. And one of the things that was unique is, when Jack was being interviewed afterwards, he kept talking about how the whole season he was celebrating. Like the whole season he was celebrating, because every week he'd say, I did the things I wanted to do in my training. I did the things I wanted to do in my rest and recovery. I did the things I wanted to do as a captain of this team. I told my dad, I told my coach, here's what I'm going to do. And I did it. And he would let himself celebrate that every week. And that was his success. And what's interesting, when he won the mile, he was able to do something that not a lot of high performers do. He celebrated like crazy for a week, because he didn't just move on to the next thing. He was just so happy. And for him, and he said it, he said, I felt like I already succeeded this season. So I just share that as maybe a tangible example of, and, it occurs to me that like our son's ability to celebrate, like, what, I made and kept these commitments. He grew as a human being. And, maybe he never wins the national championship. He still grew as a person. He still became a better version of himself. Hopefully that's, kind of a helpful answer to that question.
I mean, yeah, there's so much gold in there about commitments, about process over outcome, and about the pursuit of something and measuring it by what you control and your actions and your development as a person is the true measure of success. Because so often, right, we get to, I wrestled growing up. I do jiu-jitsu, and even now, right, I compete, and I use the example with process versus outcome. Like, you could go out and like not prepare, like show up, head somewhere else, whatever, not even be that great, not do your grappling great, and you could still win.
Yeah, like Johnny Manziel, right? When he was QB at A&M.
Yeah.
The stuff like I was doing the night before, it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, crazy. And you still got to win. But like then other times, right, you could do everything right. Like your son, you could have done everything right, and he still could have, some other person could have shown up who just runs a 3:30 mile or something, and like whatever, it's, and so it's like, so if that's your measuring stick, well, you're just throwing stuff at the wall.
Yeah.
At that point, judging yourself based on who shows up today, and then you're in high performance. But if you push, so this is like a great example of your bringing up like meta performance is looking at, did I keep my commitments? Did I stay in integrity? And to your point, the beauty of that is we do that with, the mile. What does that look like for him at his first job? We do that with our teams, and we celebrate as we go, and we stay committed. Like maybe you do hit revenue goal. maybe the market crashes and you don't, but what about the following year and the following year and the following year? Like you're in such a better position because of that development. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Absolutely. And think it's so true, because the truth, he could have gotten an ear infection, something like that, sinus infection, week up, not a chance to win, right? And that kind of stuff shows up in life. And if our only metric is the achievement of the results at the end. And again, you and I are not saying don't name the results, don't orient your life towards them. Absolutely do that. But the value is in the process. The value is who you're becoming along the way. And I think too, you got that just a little bit. It's like when you get, we will talk in Novus Global. We will talk about, hey, there's a better question than the high performance question. It's like, how can I be the best? The better question is, what am I capable of? And that's because you can ask that for the rest of your life in all kinds of situations. But then we also say there's an even better question, which is, what are we capable of? I really do think like, okay, great. Name your individual stuff. Awesome. That's good. But in all cases too, and can you, can we consider the we? It just takes your mind off you for a second. And now you're putting it on something already larger than yourself. And it gives you the opportunity. You're thinking about your success, not in terms of yourself, but you're thinking about your success in terms of something that's broader.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that when I do that thought experiment you just talked about, that when I use the what are we capable of, it's almost easier for me to stay with like process and function.
Yeah.
Like then when I think what am I capable of, I'm sort of it's almost easier for me to fall into the trap of like, here's the number or here's the thing. But for some reason when I hear we, I go back to like, well, oh geez, like because naturally outside myself, it's thinking about how would we function together? What would that look like? And the dynamics of that. What would have to be true for us to do that? And I don't know, it's an interesting thing. It kind of pulls you out of yourself.
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah. And I mean, privately offline, right? That you and I have talked about like, I wonder what kind of success we could create within, we both had some experience in the financial industry, for example. And I will say, for me, just getting on the call with you, starting that process, brainstorming a little bit, I loved it. Like, honestly, more fun than me sitting down and just thinking about me, which is great. That's fine. But, just hanging out with you and, hey, what about this? What about that? Just starting that process, thinking about what is it that we could create? I don't know. There's something about that does just create more energy, more fun almost.
Yeah, no, totally, man. I love that we've come back to this like pursuit of this grand vision, being led by fear to create beauty and have fun while doing it. Like talk about a compelling vision to me,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Man, Jason, this has been awesome, man. I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate the work you do and your commitment to it and to yourself and others. So thanks for sharing with us today, man. And we will be definitely doing work together.
Yes. Love being on the podcast, Sean. Thanks also for the work you do. And hey, people need to know you're a great dude.
Thanks, man.
You're just a good dude. And honestly, that's part of what makes it just super fun and valuable to spend time with you.
Well, thanks, man. I'm gonna sit on that when I'm meditating on my enoughness, because that does mean a lot coming from you. Thanks, man.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Thanks for being a part of the No Limit Leadership family. This isn't just a podcast. We're building a movement of no limit leaders driven to unlock our greatness and lead the world forward. If this made you think or gave you something useful, please, 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 right now, go hit follow and then share it with one leader you believe in. Challenge limits, develop leaders, fuel greatness.